Hello and welcome, Lawrence, friends, fans, family. We're hosting yet another in our series of Goal to Go sessions. Believe it or not, we're at episode 19. We're excited to have with us a new guest tonight, offensive line coach Dallas Dean. Coach Dean, welcome to Goal to Go.
Thanks, Rob. Excited to be here. Excited to talk to the fans a little bit. Really happy to join you on this and, hopefully get my information out and talk a little bit about Saturday's game. So,
Yes, sir. Well, a little inside baseball for those viewing. First of all, I know that some of you are anxious for us to start some meetings with Coach Gonzaga, and we are still working on that. I think in time we're going to get there. But in the meantime, we've got a lot of other people to meet as part of this program. And Coach Dean, you're definitely one of them. So we're excited to have you. Now, this was a very short notice setup. We're trying to make sure that we get content out every week, at least something, one or more every week. And this was on very short notice, and we are under some strict restrictions here in terms of our curfew. Let's just put it that way, as far as what we're going to cover. But with that said, are you ready to dive into some things here with me, Coach Dean?
I'm ready. Yes.
Excellent. Okay, well, let's start with the basics. Find out a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your professional pathway to Lawrence University football.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my pathway started back in 2016. I joined Marshall University's football team as a student assistant, student manager. And I was actually assigned to the offensive line. And the offensive line coach at the time was a guy by the name of Alex Mirabal. And so I was Coach Miraball's student assistant or student manager for the first 2 years I was there. And he left to go to Oregon after the 2017 season, where he coached a guy, you may have heard of him, by the name of Panay Sewell. Ended up blowing up, now regarded as one of the best offensive line coaches in college football. So after the 2018 season, I moved back home to Cincinnati and saw an email about an internship opportunity at Mount St. Joseph University, a small Division III school right there at home, right there in Cincinnati. And so I applied, ended up getting it, started in 2019 just as a basic intern, and ended up staying for 6 years. Ended up having a lot of success there after the first couple years. Over the last 3 years in 22, 23, and 24, we went combined 27-3, won 3 straight conference championships, and made the NCAA Division III playoffs 3 years in a row. And then that brings us to this summer. I was actually on vacation in Florida, got a phone call, answered it. It was a guy by the name of Adam Gonzaga. He told me that he was becoming the head football coach at Lawrence University and wanted to talk to me about coming and being the offensive line coach. And he ended up selling me on the vision. And lo and behold, here I am. So
Here you are. So during that time from 2016 onward, am I correct to understand that you focused on maybe exclusively, maybe not exclusively, offensive line?
So actually, no. So I worked on the offensive line at Marshall. When I got to Mount St. Joe, I was actually put on the defensive side of the ball. And I worked on the defensive side of the ball for the majority of my time there, actually. It wasn't until last year I moved back to the offensive line, which is where I always wanted to coach, what I always wanted to do. And then it led to this position here. So I've actually worked on both sides of the ball, which I think, really helps me because I coached linebackers. I was assistant linebackers coach there. And, just knowing some of the, technique that linebackers use to try and get offensive linemen in bad body positions and things like that, I think really helps me in coaching my guys. And, hey, this is what a linebacker is going to do and things like that.
Well, if offensive line is home for you for all intents and purposes, then welcome home.
Yes.
That brings me to my next question. What are the basics of your offensive line coaching strategy? And have you had to adapt any of that coaching strategy in any way on the fly with this particular O-line squad?
Yeah, so I think the basics of what we want to do is we want to come low to high with our hands. We don't want to, you hear coaches say, push or punch. We don't want to do that. And the reason why is because I believe that when you push a guy or you punch a guy, your shoulders come forward, and when your shoulders come forward, you start to lean. So, we want to come low to high with our hands. and snap our shoulders, get our head and shoulders back, which ultimately brings our hips and drives us through the block. So, I tell my guys, we want to lift and turn. We don't necessarily want to push and drive. Really, I haven't had to change anything. Talking it over with our offensive coordinator, they really entrusted me in what I was basically what my vision was for the offensive line. And, so they didn't make me change anything. The one thing that probably I did have to adapt to is we kind of want to be quicker up to the second level than you normally would in your normal, power scheme or zone scheme. You normally would want patient footwork, so having to adapt that to be quicker to the second level. But other than that, the basics have stayed the same.
Okay, and is any adaptation on the basis of who your mix of players is?
No, so I mean, our guys have been great so far of adapting to the things that I have coached. I think they've all accepted the fact that I've came from a very successful program, learned under a very successful offensive line coach at the Division I level, and so they've been full steam ahead. I think we have extremely smart and talented kids on our offensive line. I would, I wouldn't want anybody else on our offensive line, and so I think they've adapted to what I have said and what I've told them. And, they're just getting better every single day in that and learning my technique. It's not going to be something that they learn, just in a 3-week camp, but can we be better from week 1 to week 10? And I think we will.
From my looking at the list, it appears, Coach, that you have a fairly young offensive line squad. I don't believe there's a single senior in the group. So,
There's
what
not.
steps are you taking to kind of promote O-line cohesion, and who are kind of the leaders on that offensive line to build that as well?
Yeah, so I think I'm very lucky that I don't have a senior on the offensive line because I don't have just 3 months to coach a guy, what I want him to do. I'm going to have multiple years with a lot of these guys. And so, as far as cohesion, I told him right from the get go, from day one, offensive line play, it's like an engine in the car, right? The engine is what makes the car go. The offensive line is what makes the offense go. But just like any engine in any car, there's different parts in that engine. You got spark plugs, you got oil you got put in it, right? And if one of those things ain't working together, then the engine's not working very well and the car's not going to move very well. You're right that, all 5 guys have to be on the same page every single play, because if one of those players don't do the right thing on that play, it'll mess the entire offense up. And so, I think every single one of these kids, even though they're young, we only have 2 freshmen. The rest of them are all returners. And so they've all played together. They might not have all started together in previous seasons, but they've all played together. They all know each other. One of our freshmen is actually brothers with one of our oldest offensive linemen.
Right.
And so, that kind of helps, things like that. And so, it hasn't necessarily been an issue of trying to get them all on the same page, because they all pretty much know each other. They're all familiar with each other. They've all played with each other. As far as the leaders, we have 2 juniors, Jake Van Falsen and JC, and they've both taken incredible leadership roles. I think, I shouldn't say I think. So Jake was just voted a team captain by his teammates before our first game of the year. So that definitely, he's definitely a leader in our offensive line room as well. And so, Jake's been great to work with. JC's been great to work with. I know he's taken a leadership role as well. He's done a terrific job as our center. That's a very important position for the offensive line, right? He's got to get the ball back every single play. And, and he's done a magnificent job with that. And so I'm very happy to be coaching these guys, and I'm very happy that I get all of them back next year as well.
Next thing we got to pivot to, because we can't have this meeting without some discussion of the game we had, the game that we're looking forward to. Let's start with last week's game, hosting Martin Luther
Mm-hmm.
College. What were your takeaways from the game generally? And then what is the O-line focus for this upcoming week at Monmouth?
I don't want to just talk all about our offensive line. Talking about last week's game, our defense had a big pick six there in the second half. Looking at the stats, they held Martin Luther to just 2.5 rushing yards per attempt. X's and O's wise, I'm not sure what those guys do, but getting that big pick six, getting that big turnover in the second half, and being able to stop the run, really helped us there in the second half as well. For us, up front and even offensively, we averaged 5.8 yards per rush in that game. So that's something that we're taking great pride in. Our goal is to rush for 4 yards per carry every single game, and we smashed that. Martin Luther, I don't know if you knew this or if our fans knew this or not, but their starting defensive end, led all of Division III in sacks last year, and we held him without a sack. And so that's something that we've taken great pride in and talked about after the game of something to kind of hold our hats on. We know it wasn't perfect. We know we have to be better, but those small victories, I think, help when you're developing a team like we are. As for this week, Monmouth, they're a very well coached team. They're a very good team. But I think we're a very well coached team as well. We're going to go out there this Saturday and we're going to see where the chips fall. But our guys are definitely ready for this opportunity. They're ready to go and compete against a very good football team. And we're excited to see how Saturday goes.
It's certainly going to be tough competition.
Mm-hmm.
Monmouth is, I think, the preseason coaches poll pick to win
Yep.
the Midwest Conference, not by a decisive margin, but still the pick to do that.
Yep.
In many ways, both because of the quality of the opponent, and for another reason we're about to talk about. This is a little bit of out of the frying pan and into the fire. And I mean that in both a literal and figurative way. How do you guys anticipate as a coaching staff preparing for and addressing what is forecasted to be a very hot day? Game starts at 1 p.m. down in Monmouth. As you prepare for this upcoming Saturday, how do you account for and address the weather element of that?
Yeah, so one of our assistant coaches, Coach Ebert, our running backs coach, he every single day for the last five, the very first thing he tells us when he walks into the meeting room is, "Well, it just got hotter for Saturday. It just got hotter for
Yeah.
Saturday." So I think it's up to 92 is what they're saying. I guess it depends on what you're looking at. Yeah, we talked to our guys about it. We told them on Monday, the hydration starts now. You can't wait up until the last second. We can't control it. They can't control it. We just got to go out there, and the teams that are mentally tough enough are able to fight through it. It's hot this time of year all across the country. It's hot. We've been lucky to have a camp that hasn't been too awfully hot, but now it's time to face it. We will not make an excuse for the heat for however that game goes on Saturday. But we did mention it to our guys. We made sure we have plenty of water and Gatorade and things like that for them for this trip. And, I'm just a believer that you just can't make things like that bigger than what they are.
Oh, sure. I mean, look, the weather is going to be a factor whether you like it or not.
Correct.
That's just the way it is. We play an outdoor game in tough circumstances when
Mm-hmm.
guys are given their extreme all in these situations. No matter how you prepare for this, it seems to me, because I've seen it at every level in warm games, there's going to be cramps. There's going to be guys
Yep.
who cramp up at certain times. There are going to be guys who are going to need to take those breaks because of that. They're going to get overheated, whatever. And you guys are obviously preparing for that, thinking about that as you travel down tomorrow to Monmouth. I know that will be much of the discussion. So let's turn to the last thing, because again, we promised to stay on schedule with this and
Yep.
maintain the curfew. We want to turn back to you again for a second, Coach, and we'd like to ask you if you could tell us something about yourself that your O lineman squad and maybe your fellow coaches might not know about you. Tell us a little bit more about Dallas Dean.
I don't know how much our coaches or our players don't know about me because I'm a storyteller and I love getting to know people, and I believe the only way you get to know them is if you lay it all out there, you know. But I do have an interesting story that has happened to me that some of our fans might enjoy. When I was about 11 or 12, my mom and dad took me to a Brad Paisley concert. I was a huge Brad Paisley fan growing up, still am. I've been to several of his concerts since. Well, with any concert, you have your main liner, which Brad Paisley was the main liner, and then you have your opener. It's always somebody nobody's ever heard of, trying to get their start in the business, all that kind of fun stuff. So it just so happened that for this particular summer and for this particular concert, Brad Paisley's opener was this 16-year-old girl whose name you may have heard of before. Her name was Taylor Swift. And so at 11 or 12, we're sitting there and listening, to this 16-year-old girl, not even thinking that fast forward, 15, 20 years later, she'd be the biggest star on the face of the earth. And you'd have to take out two mortgages for your house to go see her in concert.
True.
So I don't know how much the tickets cost. They paid for them, but I can imagine it's not what a ticket to one of her concerts costs right now. So, but I've always thought that was kind of interesting, especially watching how big she was. Thinking I saw her live when she was 16 and nobody knew who she was.
You
So
never know, right? You just never know. I
you
mean,
never know.
I have to admit, I'm not necessarily a big devotee to that genre, but I do know that Brad Paisley is quite an accomplished guitarist. I've seen some of the
Yes.
things he can do.
Yeah.
Those are the things I know about Brad Paisley more than anything else.
Correct.
Well, Coach Dean, listen, I thank you very much. I know this is all on very short notice. It was for me too. But again,
Yep.
we're very dedicated for those out there who watch these programs to let you know, especially during the season, we absolutely want to make sure that we can get some content out there. We're going to be working very hard at that. Some of you who tuned in last year may remember also that a former football player on the team and alumni, Jake Spencer, also did some of the interviews, especially with players. Jake is otherwise committed this fall. He's coaching in high school football down in Florida, and so his opportunities to do this are pretty limited. So if you're wondering where Jake is, just understand that Slim has been occupied with some other things. He may guest back in here at some point. We hope he does. I think those interviews are great when it's player to player, or at least former player to player. And we'll be working on that again as well. But for now, we want to thank you again, Coach Dean, for your time. We hope to catch up with you again. We know this is an abbreviated meeting. It would be nice to catch up with you again, maybe later in the season or early next, and we can talk about the progression of your relatively young offensive line. These programs are brought to you by the Lawrence University Vikings Gridiron Club. We are always interested in your support, your involvement with that. If you'd like to know more about us, you can check us out online. We have a web page on the LU Athletics website under football. So check us out. Other than that, we thank you very much. Go Vikings and have a good night.